We are live for our fifth episode of our Schoolway Vlog series on distance learning. My name's Abby.
And I'm Jenna, and we are both academic technology specialists at the Santa Clara County Office of Education.
Today, we are talking about some tips for transitioning to distance learning.
So we want to welcome you and just kind of review what the format is going to be. Today we have 3 tips that we're going to share with you, and we have resources, and we'll share the notes page with you at the very end. And after each tip, we will go into a discussion question, something to think about. Are you ready to get into our first tip?
Let's get started.
Okay.
Tip number 1, there is no need to reinvent the wheel, especially if you are just getting started in either teaching students through an online platform or if you are new to dabbling into technology at all. So we know there's a lot of you out there who this is your first step into it, and it is certainly a scary time. We'd like to reassure you that one of our key tips is you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot out there.
Yes, so there's plenty of resources, and I know that you might be feeling very overwhelmed, especially if this is all new to you. But we have we have some places that links to places where you can go to get lesson ideas. So one of them, the screenshot here, is a screenshot of the Seesaw library. And in our last episode, we talked about Google Classroom and Seesaw. And one of the reasons we like using Seesaw, if you didn't get a chance to watch that episode, is that it's full of classroom activities that teachers have put into their library. So there's a whole community out there of teachers who are creating and sharing their activities. And when you go into Seesaw, you are free to get in and assign any of those activities to your students, or you can copy and edit them to make them to customize it for your classroom.
Yeah, it is a virtual binder full of amazing lessons that you can just copy or just assign directly to your students. Yeah. Very little work on your part.
Yeah, and there are plenty of other places to go. You know, if you just get onto your social media, I know there are lots of Facebook groups where you see teachers posting ideas of things that they're doing in the classroom. Sometimes if you find a teacher that you like to follow, there are teachers out there who are putting blogs out, and you might get some ideas from those teachers at your specific grade level or content area.
So we have 3 other resources to share with you that we wanted to highlight because we do know that there's an abundance of resources out there and people are sharing left and right. And that in and of itself is certainly overwhelming. So if you're just getting started and you want to know some good places to beg, steal, and borrow, the second place is we're going to highlight again Khan Academy. So Khan Academy, in response to school closures, put out a daily schedule that you can set up for kids ages 4 through 18. Jenna has it up there. And in addition to this schedule, they have links to some of their courses that are, all of it's free, that students can engage in, and then other resources that students and families can go to accomplish those tasks. So if the task calls for, 30 minutes or an hour of reading, then one of the links that Khan Academy has provided are links to possible books, both online and lists that you can reach for that task. So that's the second resource. The third resource, if you are ready to kind of dig into creating assignments for yourself, whether you're in Seesaw, Google Classroom, Canvas, or whatever LMS your school or district is advising you to join. This third resource is a blog. It's free. It's called Ditch That Textbook, and it has started to curate some really great practices and templates where teachers can grab and use for their students. So there it is. Right there on the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see 70 e-learning activities and templates with tutorials that'll help you out.
That is a great resource. So definitely worth checking out. And all of these are linked in our notes. So you'll have access to those.
Jenna, do you want to share? You put another one in there, I think at Choice Boards.
I did. I found, so I did a Google search this morning for educators on Twitter to follow. And one of them that came up, they are, so let me go to this home, the authors of the book Read the World. And I went to Kristen, I don't know if I'm going to say her last name right, Ziemke's page, and one of the resources that she had was choice boards. And she had learning choice boards for primary, intermediate, and I believe that there are, yeah. So the older students too. So this really reminded me a lot of game boards that I've created on HyperDocs. And I thought that this was a really good way to give students lots of choice in their learning, especially when they're at home. So I put a link to this site, and then I also put a link to the HyperDocs site in the resource page.
Yeah, choice is going to be so critical because we know we cannot control the environment that the students are in right now. They're all in different spaces. And so being able for them to choose what they're interested in and can do, I think is going to be pretty critical as you move into distance learning because you just don't know what resources they have at home or what spaces are available to them. So it's always good to think around how you can give a lot of flexibility in any of the assignments that you're giving your students.
Which actually leads to one of the other tips that we have on this page, in that learning does not have to be digital. So we don't always have to get them onto a device to share their learning. They could just, be doing a craft at home or learning something new or, practicing something and reflecting on that practice. So you don't have to always give them digital assignments, and you can really give them choice when you're giving them something on a choice board.
So true. I'm still trying to figure out what thing that I want to learn is now that I have this different space to learn in. The second bullet point that you see on your screen here is for when you're ready to start to build your own activity or assignment libraries within whatever system you're doing. Our advice is to choose key learning routines that students will engage in on a regular basis. So it's kind of hard and challenging to describe in a short amount of time. But if you do join us tomorrow at 11, we will start with some content on visible thinking strategies that go hand in hand with developing and identifying key learning routines that you can engage students in. But for now, I would advise you to think about what were the things that you asked students to do on a regular basis in terms of cognitive load in your class. So in a math class, think about, were you doing any math routines like a number talk or a 3-act task that could translate into something that students can do online? In your ELA portion, were you doing some kind of cyclical review or some kind of routine that you asked your students to do? How can that be translated into something that they could do online or on a piece of paper at home? You know, how can you continue to get the learning going in routines that they're familiar with already? Which kind of leads us to our second tip, but first let's do the reflection question.
So I know that we shared places that we like to go. The reflection question is, where is a place that you like to go to find some lesson ideas? So is there anything that we missed, or is there anything that we missed here? Or Karen, if you have any other suggestions of maybe places you like to go to get ideas?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It's been a while since I've been digging up ideas for classroom thinking, but I've always had good luck on Pinterest boards looking for some different ideas. Clearly they're not vetted and they take a little bit more work to go through. I also like the lesson ideas that come up in different tools that I'm using. So if I'm using Nearpod for something, they'll have lesson ideas. If I'm using EduPuppet, they'll have lesson ideas as well. So just digging in a little bit more on the tools that I'm using. There's some good lesson ideas out there.
That is definitely a great tip. So if there is a tool that you're already using out there, see how other teachers are using that tool and grab that inspiration. And you'll think of new possibilities for your students. Okay, so let's move on to tip number 2, and that is to start small and manage expectations.
Yeah, for sure. This task of moving our classes online can feel like such a daunting thing. But what do we tell our kids when we have them engage in a large task? We tell them, break it up into small chunks. So what is that small chunk that you can take on this week or these next 2 weeks? Our first tip is to shift one piece at a time. So if you looked at your daily schedule that you would have had if you were teaching face-to-face, what's an easy piece that you can turn into an online task? So in one of our episodes, we mentioned that a lot of teachers are doing online read-alouds. So that is one small piece that a person can, or a teacher can start to shift to an online space. If you don't want to record them, I've seen other teachers post other people recording books of or stories that they want their students to hear. And there's a ton of them on YouTube. I know there's probably some licensing issues there, but there are a ton of people who have read stories online on YouTube that you could find if you do not want to record yourself.
And you don't have to always video record yourself too. You can always think about using your voice memo app on your phone to do a recording of you reading a book, and then you post the audio file too. So it doesn't always have to just be video. Which reminds me that one of the resources that we did put up for this tip are these virtual learning conversions. So there's one for middle and upper school, and then there's one for lower school. Let me see, I'll pull over that one. And those are some ways, it gives you a list of some tools that you might start to think about using. So if you're somebody who wants to explore maybe doing some video recording for your students, you might just pick one tool and try and get good at that. And this one suggests Screencastify, and that's a great tool for you to do some screen sharing and some video for your students.
Yeah, I love just visually how this document lays it out for a teacher. I know this is for a specific school system, that a resource for them, but just thinking about what will translate and what doesn't translate yet. And knowing that every school leader, every district leader that I've spoken to in the past week and a half or so, you know, they recognize that this is going to be a huge learning curve. And so have kind of given this blanket permission to everyone to take this slowly. I've heard it over and over again from principals and from coaches and from district leaders that we're going to take this slow, and we're going to try to give everyone the support that they need to make this happen, because we know that all teachers want what's best for the students, and we'll do what it takes. The GIF at the beginning of this whole presentation was of Bill Murray saying, "You're amazing," and it is reminding me of these messages that I've been seeing on social media of how, you know, in a matter of a week or 2 weeks, hundreds and thousands of teachers have done amazing work to adjust to this crazy time in our lives. And so big kudos to all of the adjustments that you're making so far. Continue to move forward and think about those small steps that you can take to make learning, you know, interesting and fun for your students online.
Yes, agreed, definitely. And our second tip for this is to embrace creative possibilities of flexible learning. And so Abby shared with me yesterday something great about, you know, taking this opportunity to practice that culturally responsive pedagogy. So do you want to share what you said about that yesterday?
Yeah, so one of the tenets of culturally responsive pedagogies is bringing students' lives into the work and the learning. And in this time where all the students are at their homes, far away from the classroom, the four walls of the classroom, it's imperative that you do that, because, you know, otherwise you're not adjusting to the situation. So how can you have them reflect on what's happening in their lives, or do some learning in their lives that is extremely appropriate for their situation and their frame of mind, and being mindful of all of, you know, like the stresses out there, but also I think there's some great possibilities that they can share a huge part of themselves with your class and with you through either the reflection questions that you're asking or the check-ins that you're doing with your students. So I think there's like this great possibility to help students bring their world into this virtual classroom that you're setting up. And actually, that kind of stemmed from this article that I ran across online, and it's posted in the resources. And it is, the title is, there it is. It's encouraging us to become historians of this time. So in 20, 30 years, 40 years, people are going to look back and say, well, what happened? What was this COVID-19? What happened? And your students have this great opportunity, because we are at an historic moment, really, of what's happening, for them to be historians. So for them to document, how are they feeling? What are they doing? How are they changing their life because of this pandemic? If only we had that information from like the way early pandemics, maybe we would have reacted sooner or differently.
I love it. This is a great article. I'm so glad that you put it in our resources. I mean, this is a unique opportunity, and we can really encourage our students to document this time and be a part of this in writing this history. So let's see. So our food for thought is, what is one way that you can get your students to demonstrate creative learning at home? Do we have any thoughts around that?
Well, I think this is something we're going to be talking about in the next couple of days. It sounds like you set us up for our next couple of webinars. It's about using photography. You know, we're going to talk a lot about teachers and how they can integrate photography into their work. But how about the kids? They're home now. They're in a very unique situation with their families, away from their friends. This opportunity to be able to get outside and maybe take pictures of what's going on in their world, you know, using photographs as a way of documenting this very, very unique period in time. You're right, Abby, this is going to be, you know, hopefully we'll never see this again in our lifetimes. And to have our kids who now have some pretty cool tools to start documenting what's taking place in our world, love to have it from their perspectives and not just from, you know, the pundits and the politicians and the news media, but, you know, what are kids experiencing and how are they having to make shifts in their lives in order to get through this. And it'd be awesome.
Do you guys remember H1N1?
Vaguely.
Yeah, so vaguely. And it happened just about 10 years ago.
And SARS, I mean, that was part of our lives too.
And I feel like the reaction to this virus, and I don't know comparatively the severity, I'm guessing that it's similar. I'm going to remember forever because of the time that we're in. Even in a span of 10 years, the way that we've communicated and the way we've documented our actions has changed so drastically that I couldn't even remember anyone being affected by H1N1. And yet, when I look at the numbers, they're staggeringly large.
Yes.
The number of people who had it and died from it.
Well, I mean, you're right. And I think it has a lot to do with our access to social media. And that I know, you know, every hour my phone goes off with a news release from, you know, the New York Times or the local news station. So, you know, we're just seeing more of that information than we did 10 years ago because we have access to it. The news is getting out so quickly. It's not just we have to wait till 6 o'clock to watch the evening news to see what's going on in our world. We're getting it constantly. And we're making choices. We have to make choices now about how much of it we want to get and when do we turn it off and how do we disconnect. And such an important conversation for families to have at home too. Yeah, how much is too much when it comes to you know, our access to all this information.
Yeah, the more important it is that we have people documenting it from different experiences. I think what the media has done, and sometimes even with our own within our own systems, when we're trying to make decisions, we're relying on kind of a narrow scope of what experiences are out there,
right?
And then making our decisions based on what we believe the experiences are. So it's very important to hear the voices of the students and the teachers out there.
We've seen some pretty remarkable videos of students, you know, getting together to sing, play music. That's one way of them sharing their voice, and that will always be, you know, now in our archives of how we got through this period of time. If we can continue to expand that with student writing, student photography, art, all those other ways that students can share their experiences and share their thoughts. Think about how important that type of information is going to be next time this goes around as sort of that relief for those who have to deal with this again. I think that'd be real special information to be retaining.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a unique time, and allowing students to share their creativity with, you know, whatever they're passionate about. And it'll be interesting to see all of the things that come out of this. I don't have any kids here at my house, but I'm trying to think about how I've been creative in this time. And one thing that I've been doing a lot of is baking, and I've been doing a lot of like gluten-free baking, and my husband likes to cook too. So we're actually, as I'm trying out new recipes, we've been having lots of discussions about, you know, things that I can add and things that I can try next time, and like trying to make up these really cool complete meals. And it's just, our creativity right now is coming out through all the food that we're eating. So, you know, now I'm actually kind of interested in like documenting this process, because none of this would have ever happened had, you know, we've been in our regular routine out eating at restaurants and doing all those things that
Right.
we'd normally be doing.
I'm making started crocheting. I've been working on a project and ran out of yarn. And I haven't been able to, of course, go to Michael's to get what I need. So I was just using scraps, and now I'm working on a blanket made out of scrap yarn that I have. I feel like I'm Laura Ingalls Wilder, you know, using scraps to make this blanket. And it's very colorful and it's very pretty, and I'm really happy with it. And I mentioned it to some friends, and today I'm getting a second delivery of somebody's yarn. People are actually dropping off yarn on my front porch, so I can have this yarn to continue to make this blanket. This blanket will always be my COVID-19 pandemic blanket. And, you know, not only in it does it have, you know, yarn that I've used for other projects when I've made, you know, my Hobbs, my Calvin and Hobbes Hobbs and all my other things, but now I have friends' donations to it. So they're now part of my blanket. So it's a similar thing. I'll be able to always have that and share it with others, that, you know, this is my memory, and this came out of my memory of this event. So I love what you're doing.
That is awesome. And that's the cornerstone of what, like, creativity is, when you have these constraints and then you have to create something from it. And so we're in a time when we have lots of constraints and lots of opportunities to be creative in our problem solving, in our art, in our whatever we want to do with our lives.
Yep.
Which is awesome. And it's not to diminish that there are people out there who are like, I mean, these are really positive stories and results of our shelter in place and COVID-19, but for sure is not to diminish anyone else's experience and stress and struggles out there, but just to note that there are some silver linings out there that I think, I mean, are uplifting and fun too.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Now, we know that a lot of people are struggling, a lot of families home having to deal with both their, you know, work and their children's lives. And it's, you know, we've heard those stories too. Not easy.
So our last tip, as you are transitioning to distance and online learning, is as you are learning and teaching in different spaces, those spaces also come with their challenges, but they also come with their assets. So we're inviting, as our third tip, you to think about the assets that come with the space that you're currently inhabiting. So our first bullet point is to think about space and time differently. We know that we shouldn't be asking our teachers to be online from 8 to 5. So what does that actually mean? If I'm going to do an online lesson, that means that maybe I'm online from 10 to 11, and then I'm starting to think about, well, what can students do without me there face to face? Which I think is a huge pedagogical shift from how we are structuring a lot of school and learning currently. So think about space and time that way, but also your resources. Do you want to talk about teacher leaders within a district, Jenna?
Sure. So, you know, I know a lot of districts out there have their teacher leaders, and those are the people in your district that, you know, they're there for you, and you can reach out to them to get ideas and help with lesson planning. I know that before being in this job, I was a technology coach in Berryessa and a TOSA in the Union School District. And, you know, I always loved it when teachers reached out to me, and you know, I know that they're willing to help you through this time. So don't forget to reach out to the teacher leaders at your school site. They might not be coaches or TOSAs, but you know that there are teachers also on your staff that maybe have been doing a lot of digital things in their classrooms. And I'm sure that if you reached out to them, a lot of them would be more than willing to help you through this time, because at this time, like, we all have to be there to support each other. So definitely reach out to those teacher leaders.
And the amount of support that people have been offering online is actually pretty beautiful. I just was messaging Aaron Torres out of Berryessa Union, whom we highlighted in our second episode on staying connected to students and families. And he asked me if I had any other Flipgrid resources, because he was being asked to deliver a webinar on how to use Flipgrid in his district, which is amazing, because I know that he's wanted to kind of uplift some digital tools in his school and district for a while, and there have been maybe a little bit of pushback or some barriers in terms of, I don't have any time, or I don't have any space in my day to do something like that. But now is his time to shine. And so I would, if you're a teacher out there who is looking for some new collaborators, I would think back to some old staff meetings. There must have been someone on your staff who delivered something that you thought to yourself, I'm not going to need that right now. And now is the time that you need them. And I'm positive that many of those teachers out there are looking to help. That's all from a lot of people I've just heard. Like, how can I help? How can I help? And so now's their time for you to rely on them. The third bullet point that we have is, in addition to your teacher leaders and your district leaders within your system, you have a lot of people at the Santa Clara County Office of Ed who really want to support you in this time when you're ready. And so some of our departments have even started some, not really sure what to call them, not sure what the official term is, office or collaborator hours that are consistent. Our team is still trying to figure out and create that schedule. So we'll be pushing that out as well. But we wanted you to know that there are people on call who, if you want to do some lesson planning with them, if you want some ideas, if you want to brainstorm with them, they are there. So the screenshot that we have on this screen is of the team that consists of ELA, ELL, ELD, History, Social Science, and Civic Engagement. So they're available Monday through Friday, 10 to 11 a.m. at that Zoom link, which we will put into our notes as well.
And you can always reach out to any of us too. So, we're usually on here not at 1 o'clock. So you're always welcome to join our webinars. And if you ever have any questions about anything, just feel free to email us. And we are definitely happy to help. So our food for thought for this one is just for really to think about who within your system holds the expertise that you might rely on, and who outside of your system holds the expertise that you might rely on. Should we just go all the way to our notes? Our notes can be found at this bit.ly/SCCOE vlog 5 notes, and you'll find links to all of those resources that we talked about today. And a lot of what we talked about today, like Karen and Abby both said, lead right into our next episode, which is visual thinking strategies part 1. So I actually believe that Abby and Karen will be leading it. Is that correct? Tomorrow, and then
Yes, Karen
and
and
then
I will be leading it, and not a third Karen.
The other Karen.
Not
Yeah.
this Karen Larson.
Larson.
She won't be there.
My evil twin.
Yeah.
No.
Uh-oh.
But please do note the time change. We've got a couple of overlapping things that we've got going on tomorrow at 1. So tomorrow at 11, join us.
Yes. So 11 just for tomorrow, and then we'll be back to our regular time at 1. And our contact information is also there.
Thanks for joining us. See you
All
again
right.
soon.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.